Hey guys, what's up? Hope everybody's having a good day out there today, and thanks for taking a few minutes to tune into the video here. Much appreciated. And today we're going to have a discussion. I'm going to talk about frog fishing in the springtime of the year, sort of show you a few modifications I make with my frogs, and sort of just give you a foundation of where to begin on as far as different lakes that you guys fish around the country. And you know, frogs, man, they've been around forever. I mean, people think of frog fishing about something like it's some new technique or something ever since like Dean Rojas made it famous back in, 15 or 20 years ago with that Spro bronze-eye frog. But I remember frogs back in reading fishing magazines back in like the 70s, about frog fishing was popular even back then. Back then though, it was pretty much relegated to Florida. When people thought about frog fishing, they thought about fishing it around, lily pads, shallow grass, that type of stuff. Nobody ever thought about fishing frogs how we do today. So it sort of stayed, there was a niche for it for like 40 some plus years until, like I said, Dean Rojas was probably the angler that brought it to the forefront in tournament situations. And ever since then, it's been a big player throughout, from the springtime of the year, summer and fall. It's a big, just a great way to catch bass that I think was pretty much uncovered up until, like I said, 15 or 20 years ago. And today I first of all, I want to walk you through the two main frogs that I use and a little bit of modification I do to them. And then I'm going to, give you some, tips and pointers on how and when you want to fish them. So let's show you the first two frogs first, what we're talking about here. The two frogs that I use are the Mega Bass Big Gabbit frog, which is this, and the Zoom hollow body frog. And I like this one because they make a couple different sizes. You can see how much bigger the Zoom frog is over the Big Gabbit Mega Bass. And let's get into the modifications here a little bit, what I do to it. This is the way the Big Gabbit comes out of the package. And you know me, I don't like anything that's uniform. So one of the first things you want to do to all your frogs is you got to trim the skirts back. And the reason you trim the skirts back is twofold. Number one, it gives the frog better side-to-side action because you don't have the drag on the back end. And number two, it just gives the bass a smaller target to hit where they tend to miss it less. So the first thing I do is I trim whatever the skirt length is. I'll trim the skirt to half its length like this. Like that. And then I don't want, see how uniform that is? I don't want any type of uniformity. So I'll go in and I'll trim, halfway up a couple of the strands to get the skirt to flare out a little bit, to get some sort of uneven edges like that. Sort of brings it up a little bit like that. And see, it's got a little bit of irregular features. But that's the first modification I make to it. The second one I do, and this frog here, a lot of frogs, like the bronze-eye frogs, they're really hard. The plastic's pretty hard. But what I like to do, even on like the Big Gabbit or the Zoom, which are fairly soft frogs, is I like to take a pair of pliers and I go through and I basically just, I pull on the plastic like this. Basically, you just pull it. And what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to break up some of those fibers that are in there. Doesn't make any difference on which frog you're using. I always do this to every one of them. And it stretches them out a little bit. And basically, like I said, just breaks some of that stuff up. So I'll go through all over the frog with it. And when you do that, sometimes it scars it up a little bit, which I actually like. I like that scarring up aspect of it. And by spending a lot of time, pulling on this thing like that, softens the whole body of the frog up and makes it where it collapses a lot easier when that fish hits it. Finally, what I do is you can see the hooks are tucked in pretty tight right here. Unless I'm fishing some type of super, super thick cover, I always take my pliers and I want to bend the hooks out a little bit. Not much, just a little bit. And what this does, it just gives the fish a little bit more of a gap. See, I've got those bent out just a little bit there, opened it up just a little bit. And it's still really weedless like this, but what this does, it just gives you more point not to have to worry about this plastic in there. So that's the modifications. And I do the same thing on the Zoom frog here. I'll take the same way, cut it in half, go in there and trim it up like this. Get them all irregular. Got the different like that. Then I'll go in, I'll do the same thing with the hooks, bend the hooks out a little bit, you know, stretch the bait out quite a bit. And that's how I modify them to get them ready to fish. The next setup you want to do is you want to make sure you got the right equipment for it to throw the frog on, because the frog is a really equipment specific type of a lure. One of the biggest mistakes a lot of people make is they use too stiff of rods on a frog. I like to use a rod that has, you know, just some type of a medium heavy tip on it. A 7-foot rod. I definitely want a 7-foot rod, but I don't want this broomstick, like a 7.5-foot broomstick flipping stick. I want a 7-foot rod because that way I'm going to get the power and I got the length on the cast, but it still allows me to work the bait. But the softer tip, it allows you to work that bait a little bit easier, and also once you hook the fish, you don't lose as many fish because the rod's not quite as stiff. The reason you can get away with like a medium soft type tip on a rod is you're using the braided line, so there's no stretch on it whatsoever. So when you set the hook on a 7-foot rod that has some type of a medium heavy tip on it, you still get that penetration because you have no stretch in the braid. But once you get those fish hooked, you have the ability to fight that fish a lot better. And also some type of a medium stiff type tip, it skips the bait better. You can actually control it and you can manipulate it better. So from that standpoint, try to stay away from those extra heavy, super stiff tips on your rod, and any rod that's over 7 foot long. That seems to me like it's the best setup. Line is really critical too. Most of the time I'm using anywhere between 40 to 50 pound test braided line. I don't like to use 65. I know a lot of guys use 65. I don't see any reason for 65 because, number one, I think that 65 lays a little bit too heavy in the water. I think it telegraphs a little bit too much, and I've never had any problems, you know, with 40 to 50 pound tests. Sometimes I'll even use 30 pound test braid, but I've never broke a fish off in that ever, you know, and ever since I've been fishing, and it just seems like I get better performance out of the bait. So next, it's like when and where do you fish a frog? The applications for a frog bite are basically any time the fish will hit a topwater lure. So you're talking about water temperatures. Once that water temperature starts to get in the mid to upper 50s, like we are right now around this part of the country, this is when you start catching them on a frog. And one of the things you'll find out about frog fishing this time of the year in the spring is the biggest bass that you catch throughout the course of the year are normally right now. You have more big bass shallow, and when you get in the right situation, a frog, it can just be super deadly in the springtime of the year when that water's in the upper 50s up until it's like in the mid 60s, mid to upper 60s, which is usually between, you know, late March into May, depending upon what part of the country you're in. The key is where do you want to fish this frog at? So the things you want to look for in frog fishing when we're talking about not fishing a frog around vegetation, because frog fishing around vegetation is a completely different ball game. I'm not talking about the traditional ways of throwing frogs over matted vegetation, lily pads, all that type of stuff, where you see, you know, these fish busting through milfoil beds and that type of stuff. That's a completely different type of frog fishing. The frog fishing I'm talking about is open water frog fishing. And so the thing that you want to think about is when you're, think that some of the days you've had real good buzzbait that days in the springtime of the year. Anywhere where you think you can catch those fish, like on a buzzbait or something like that, is a prime location for a frog. Super shallow water is the key. Things I like to look for this time of year are the back ends of coves. I look for behind boat docks and underneath boat docks, around any type of lay down wood, specifically on those days that are a little bit unseasonably warm. You know, the days when you have a light southerly breeze, the air temperature may be 5 to 10 degrees above normal, especially on those days that don't have any wind. The best springtime frog days you're going to have are those glass smooth days where it's, like I said, that sun's baking down in the water and it's pushing those fish up shallow, you know, to, you know, sometimes 12, 15 inches of water they get into this time of year. And I'm looking for water visibility anywhere between, say, 1.5 to 3 feet is the prime situation for that. And flat banks is another key. So, you know, if you can think about most every lake across the country, when you get towards the back of the creeks, back of the coves, that type of stuff, you have the banks starting to flatten out. You know, you got some overhanging trees, you got wood in the water, stumps, docks, whatever like that. That's the type of stuff you want to throw the frog in. Another key on the frog is when you throw it up on the bank, make sure that you hit the bank with it, because you don't want to land like 2 foot off the bank, because a lot of times you're throwing on top of the fish or you're throwing past them. These springtime fish that bite a frog, they get right up on the bank. So I'm wanting to throw that frog right up on the bank, actually hit the shoreline with it. And one of my favorite ways is to do this is like skipping it under walkways on docks. Super highly effective way of doing it. So another thing about that is once the frog hits the water or it first makes its landing in the water, one of the things I like to do is I let it hit the water and I just wait till the ripples all dissipate. You know, it may take 5 or 10 seconds before the ripples dissipate. And once it gets smooth, that's when I just twitch it 2 or 3 times and stop it. Twitch it 2 or 3 times and stop it. Because the strike zone that I'm looking at is small most of the time. It's usually right next to some type of a target, dock corner, stump, lay down, you know, a shade pocket, whatever. It's not like I'm working this bait all the way back to the boat. So you want to work it slow. You want to take your time with it. You want to be patient with it. You want to let it set still for a while, especially in the springtime of the year when that water temperature is still not real warm. That's the key to pulling those big fish up to hit this thing. So I'm never working it like, you know, just on a consistent, you know, movement like that. I'm always popping it a couple times, stopping it, popping it, stopping it. So, and, you know, when you're in the back of these tight coves and there's no wind at all, water's really shallow, that's the way you want to fish it to catch the big ones. Another thing is, in order to catch fish on a frog in open water, you have got to get the action out of it. You can't just like, you know, reel it across the surface, you know, just in a straight line. You can catch fish like that, but in order to maximize a frog bite, you have to get working it just like a zare spook, just like that, back and forth, twitch, twitch, stop, twitch, twitch, stop. That's the big key on it. And the problem with a lot of frogs is they're not user friendly. It's not like throwing a zare spook out there where you can just, you know, just work it like that and the bait works perfect. A lot of times a frog will nosedive. A lot of times if you don't get the right cadence and rhythm, it just goes straight. It'll scoot forward like that and not have a lot of side to side action. In order to get that hard darting action side to side like that, the whole key is you've got to keep that rod tip low to the water. I'm talking like you got to keep the rod tip right at the water's edge. And you want to make short, quick snaps like that. If you try to make long snaps like that, you're going to kill the action on the frog and make it nosedive. So you want to keep that rod low, and when you jerk, you want to jerk the rod down like that, and just real, you know, short snaps like that. That is what gets that frog darting back and forth like that, which is the key to getting frog bites in open water. So anyway, that's my tips there, guys. I mean, it sounds simple, but those are some things that I've learned the hard way over the years. Those are the things that's been really effective for me. One final thing is colors. I use a variety of colors a lot of times. I mean, if it's really, really dark out, like rainy, low light conditions, I like to go with the white frog. Most of the time though, I like to use some type of a frog pattern frog or black. Black, frog pattern, and white are the three that I use 95% of the time. And a lot of that time it's just a matter of experimentation. I don't really think that the frog color is that important, but I do think you want the fish to be able to see that bait. So adjust your colors to the water visibility and the light intensity. Again, a general rule of thumb is the dirtier the water, the cloudier the day, the more I go to the whites. And the clearer the day and the clearer the water, that's when I'm going more to the frog patterns and the blacks. So hope that helps out, you guys. I think it will. I mean, we're right in the middle of frog season right now. This is a great time of year to be throwing the frog. keep an eye on those areas of your lake that is reaching 60-degree water temperature, and just give it a try. I mean, that's one of the things I like to do is, like, when those fish are starting to bed or starting to get, keyed in on bedding, I like to just burn the bank with the frog. Just get on there and just cover water with it in shallow water. It's a great way to catch 4-pound plus bass. So anyway, I hope you guys like the tip. If you like it, hit this like button, much appreciated. Subscribe if you haven't, and we'll see you guys later on with another tip. Bye.